Back. Welcome back. This is the People's Voice. I am Trey Evans and I am the People's Voice. Thank you again for checking out the podcast this week. As always, it is greatly appreciated. As always, we thank everyone who is taking some time out to listen to the podcast today. We do understand that you could be utilizing your time to do something else, so we do appreciate you taking time out to spend your time equity with us. As always, if this information is valuable, we ask that you subscribe to the podcast. That way you'll be notified when each episode is released. And we do put out a new episode each and every Friday, which is heard on all podcast platforms. And then we put up a video on YouTube on a weekly basis as well for those of you who would like to watch the podcast. But as always, thank you and welcome to the People's Voice podcast. So today I want to get into the conversation about voting. And, we are coming up on a huge election year in terms of national voting, right? The conversations and the back and forth and the bickering has already begun regarding who will be the next president of the United States, whether that will, remain, if Joe Biden will remain as president, or it looks like, I guess, if Donald Trump will make a return to office. So, there's been a lot of conversation about that and about voting in particular. So today, what I want to talk about is voting in local elections, because I think that that conversation oftentimes is definitely not discussed enough, and all of the statistics, kind of back up that statement, because voting in local elections, the voter turnout is normally very, very much lower than in the national election. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about voting in local elections, voting in municipal elections, and want to cover, what that turnout looks like, because the numbers, like I said, are extremely low, and to B, explain to those who may not understand the importance of those elections and exactly what is, basically how that affects you, far more greater than the national elections. So that's what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about voting in local elections. And, just to, kind of get it started, one of the reasons that I wanted to talk about this, because like I said, there's been a ton of conversation, obviously, about the elections and the national election, I should say. And it's very easy for people to talk about that, right? Because, in many instances, the national election truly is, for a lack of a better description, a popularity contest, right? And I say that because, oftentimes in the national elections, and I don't want to just generalize, I'll just say in the conversations that I've had, many people often vote based on really how the candidate makes them feel, right? It's more of a feeling than it is actually digging into the their campaign promises or their agendas of each individual candidate. A lot of times, that many people that I've had conversations with don't have a deep understanding of not only who the particular candidate is in terms of his or her politics, right? When I say politics, I mean, again, their agendas, their beliefs, some of the campaign promises that they make, not only do they not understand that, but they oftentimes may not even have taken the time to educate themselves about the candidate that they're going up against. And I've said it, a million times on this podcast. First of all, I'll just say, because you get a new listener every time you do the podcast, but I am a registered independent, right? So I don't, I'm not Democrat, Republican, and I vote based on candidates who provide or who have campaign promises or agendas that are in line with the things that I would want in a candidate. And I'll just be, very transparent. Have voted for candidates who been Republican, been Democrat, been Green Party. It doesn't matter to me. I'm going to vote based on what I feel I want my candidate to do if he or she is to get into office. That's how I vote. And I wish more people, took that into consideration, but I'm going down a whole nother path. But my point being is that, many times people vote how they feel. And, the national election is always polarizing because people can just look at the candidate or hear a soundbite and say, I like what he or she said, or I don't like what he or she said, or look how he or she, looks when they give a speech, and I can relate to what he or she said. And so it gives individuals an opportunity to discuss and be passionate about it. And obviously, millions of dollars are thrown into these campaigns. So, you're on your social media, your television, your radio, you're hearing these candidates. So it's constantly being fed to you. And I'm using that to now pivot over to local elections. Now, all of those things that I just said, when you start thinking about your local elections, you are not usually inundated with that amount of information being proactively sent to you, right? When it comes to candidates for your local council person, your state representative, your education boards, your local mayors, things of this nature, your district people. And it's those elections that really have the biggest impact on the voter on an immediate basis. Matter of fact, I was reading an article here from, what article was I reading? Was this? This was from Carnegie. And this is from a couple of years ago, but they did a great breakdown about local voter turnout. And in this article, what they described was, basically talking about exactly, what I'm saying. Right here, one of the first lines that you see on this article, it says, according to the National School Board Association, voter turnout at school board elections is often just 5 or 10%. And that's from the National School Board Association. Now, again, these are elections that are held locally, and these decisions that are made regarding, school safety and book banning and, what teachers can and can't say and how mental health is to be dealt with in the classrooms, even down to how your child is being taught. These decisions are made by your local school board. And if you have no idea about who is on the board and what their agendas are, what their beliefs are, those who do, right, know who is on those boards and know when those elections take place, they go down and vote and they get those people in. And then you have situations like down in Florida where they're trying to, you know, change the dialect about what slavery really was, and trying to omit certain parts of history to, not make, children feel bad about, some of the atrocities of the United States in past centuries. So, that's just one stat in terms of how important it is for individuals to be more connected about what's going on in their local elections. But I'm reading through this article, and again, I thought it was a great article. Of course, I'll link it, excuse me, in the video when I post it. But it has a graphic here, and it shows voter turnout based on the presidential elections, based on the midterms, and then based on municipal, and then, local school board elections. And again, this information, and well, I'll talk about that a little bit more about how to get that information. But in this graphic, it shows that, well over 60%, 70% of people will turn out, or at least they'll have at least 70% voter turnout for presidential elections. For midterms, it's more like 50%. But then when you get down to your municipal and your school board elections, you're looking at, less than 20%. And again, these are the important elections. These are the elections that affect you, your children, where you live, things of that nature. Going a little bit through the article, it says, kind of reiterates what I just said about the different percentages, for the different elections. But one of the things that it highlights here, it talks about, again, the important decisions that are made at the local level. So services like police officers, fire departments, transportation, housing, libraries, drinking water, parks, public schools, all of these are in your local elections. And again, these affect each and every individual far more longer than any, national election decision, right? And the changes are immediate. I mean, literally, when that election takes place, a new council person or a new district person can begin to put changes in place, and you'll feel the effect of that literally within that year. I mean, oftentimes when you have a rezoning of schools or rezoning of neighborhoods, these are local elections and local officials that are making these decisions. This has nothing to do with Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And so, I wanted today, again, to, kind of press that point. It has, and again, I'm reading an article from the Carnegie Corporation. They did a great breakdown, and that's why I'm kind of referring to it. But they also, talk about a national study. And they say here, according to a 2022 national study by the National Bureau of Economic Research, they say nearly 90,000 school board members oversee more than 50 million public school students, and they have broad responsibilities. That also includes, and I'm pausing for effect here, also includes the allocation of $600 billion in expenditures. And I'm going to say that again. 90,000 school board members oversee education for more than 50 million public school students here in the United States. Okay? And out of those 90,000 school board members, okay, they basically oversee the spending of $600 billion in expenditures. So if you are living in a city or in a town and you are not happy with the decisions that the schools are making, you feel like schools are not being properly funded, that money is not being properly allocated, this has nothing to do with Donald Trump or Joe Biden. This is your local school board members. This is your local council people, your local district people who have made these decisions, which is why it is very important for us to increase our knowledge of what is going on in these elections and being much more participatory in the voting process for local elections. I was looking at a news story here from WBST, which is a station in Indiana, and they talked to a political science professor, and she kind of explained, why, local election turnout is so low. So I'm going to play that, and then, I'll, finish up discussing this, and then we'll close out. But definitely good information for everyone to kind of chew on. So
on the candidates,
it's difficult to break through in a world where people don't have landlines where everybody picks up. They are often screening their calls. They're often not answering their doors. We're not all watching the same media at the same time for the candidates to go and talk about what they stand for.
Bedian says that voters...
And that was a political professor, Elizabeth Benion, who again was talking on WBST, which is a station in Indiana. But, that's definitely, a huge part of it, right? Because, the methods that were once used to contact local voters about local elections are no longer utilized, right? You can't call, most people don't have a landline. If they do, they're not answering it. Obviously, if you call someone on their cell phone, they don't recognize the number, they generally won't answer it. And then, as she stated there, knocking on doors and things of that nature, the world has changed and many candidates don't even participate in that when I'm talking about local candidates. But just to kind of go on and just to give some additional information. So, in terms of those local elections, again, you're talking about individuals that are making decisions for you today, right? Right now, the next council meeting, the next district meeting, the next school board meeting, they're making decisions about you, about your children, about your family. And so it is imperative that you are, locked in and participating in these elections. I'll read one more stat that I thought was interesting from this article here. Again, this is from the Carnegie Corporation. It says, while more than 90% of school board members are elected by their local communities, 90%. In some cities like Boston, Chicago, and New York City, school board members are appointed by mayors or even governors. So again, depending, especially in Boston, Chicago, New York, those huge cities, it makes a decision about who you're voting for when it comes to mayor and also governor. But I wanted to keep it, again, down on the local level. But I thought that was a great point. One more point that I saw here, just to break it down by race, right? But I should say break it down by demographics. Basically, I'm reading the article here from Fair Vote, fairvote.org, and it says that, young people are much less likely to vote than older ones, right? Which, again, has a huge effect on who is in these seats, because younger voters, younger families, younger people usually have younger children. And so a lot of these decisions about the schools and the redistricting and how many parks are going to be allocated and if they're going to, renovate the libraries and things of that nature, this is all happening at the local level. So you need to be, tapped into what's going on in your local area and participating in those local elections. I guess I do want to talk about this. Just there was a suggestion here about how you can increase voter turnout. It says, for better representation, you need more diversity, obviously, in choices for people that are going to run for these offices, which I do encourage people as well, especially at the local level. Best way to to get what you need done is to run yourself. For those of you who are interested in that, obviously there has to be a change in reach out, but also there has to be more information that is pushed out to individuals who want to have that information, who need to have that information, to make better decisions about what's going on locally. Last point out that I'll give out here is in terms of voter turnout, and I'm reading an article here from the National Civic League. It says the turnout for local elections is historically both low and less representative of community demographics, which is true because going back from a demographic standpoint, typically you have higher rates of voters, based on age. Like I said, and it says here 65 plus year olds are 7 times more likely to vote in local elections than 18 to 34. The median age of local election voters is typically in their 60s. Whites vote at rates 20% higher in local elections than non-white voters, which again falls back to the demographics of many in the community. And then, I think last point here, and again, I'm reading an article from the National Civic League. It says the overall impact is that local elected officials and policies are disproportionately influenced by older, affluent white voters, determining representatives in terms of democracy and the effectiveness of local governments. Research has found that less representative elections contribute to poor outcomes for minorities, including uneven prioritization of public spending, which I talked about a little bit earlier when I was talking about the $600 billion that is controlled by certain board members, education board members. But that's what I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to kind of give a little bit of that information because, like I said, and I'll be hitting this, at least once a quarter up until the election, but we need to do better in terms of voting and participating in local elections, because those are the elections that determine, that have the greatest impact on you as an individual, in your community and your family. So I thoroughly encourage you to get involved in on this. You'll have to be proactive to go seek that information because, oftentimes it's not being pushed out to the masses, especially those who are typically not likely to participate in local elections. But that's my time for today. I do hope this information was valuable. As always, if you would like to leave a comment, you can reach us on social media. You can reach me or you can reach us at the People's Voice Podcast on Instagram. Or if you want to tap in with me, Trey Evans, you can just Google Trey Evans, or you can reach me on any social media platform. And all comments are welcome and appreciated. But as always, Dreams are not just for sleeping. Please wake up and live your dreams. My name is Trey Evans, the people's voice. Tell somebody about the dream. Salute.